I've seen many films so far this year, but I kept forgetting to review them for one reason or another. A lot of the time I forgot I saw the film, or when I started writing the script I realised that there was just nothing to say about these movies. So I'm going to go through everything I've seen so far this year and get up to date with some of the big films that have come out so far. Escape Room was a pretty below average movie. I admittedly had little to no expectations going into the film, so I left not really feeling disappointed or in any way satisfied either. The film basically is like a tamer, less interesting and more toned down Saw, in which a group of people are stuck in multiple rooms full of traps that they must solve to move on to the next room. Except since this film is PG-13, so there is no gore or any violent scenes whatsoever, they have to rely on the characters and the stories to make the film entertaining. The issue with this though is that both of these things are really boring. The story has been done to death, the characters are for the most part run of the mill and cliched, and the script is just pretty atrocious. The film fails on nearly every level possible, but it does it in a way where you're constantly left thinking, as terrible as it may be, it could be a lot worse. The final product is a stupid, uninteresting mess, but one that isn't even close to being offensively bad. Everything in the film is bad, but not terrible, so the film is pretty forgettable and not really worth your time. It's the sort of film that maybe if you have a free afternoon and are looking for some mindless horror trash on Netflix, that I'd recommend it. But if you want a legitimately well-made and scary horror movie this year, check out Us instead, which we'll get to later on. I give it 3 Saw 2s out of 10. Glass could have been something spectacular in either a good or a bad way. As much of a mixed bag that M. Night Shyamalan's filmography may be, Unbreakable is probably my favourite film he's ever done, and Split is also quite close to being up there. So I was so excited to see Glass, because it could have been something really ridiculous, or it could have actually created a really interesting cinematic universe. The final product was something that was somewhere bang slap in the middle. There were parts of the film that were almost unwatchably bad, but then there were chunks where I was having a great time and I thought the film's idea was coming together pretty well. David and Elijah from Unbreakable and Kevin Wendell Crumb from Split are all put into a psychiatric hospital inside a private ward where Sarah Paulson is studying people who believe they have superpowers. The film has its moments, which are basically any parts where James McAvoy is doing his thing. He is just as incredible in this as he was in Split. His performance was incredibly impressive and he manages to play all these different personalities impeccably. He was the only entertaining part of the film because every other actor is about as dull as dishwater. Everyone else is clearly phoning it in to the point that whenever James McAvoy isn't on screen, you're incredibly bored. Of course, there's a big Shyamalan twist as well, which I won't spoil, but man, is it pretty idiotic and makes the film almost completely pointless. But to be fair to the film, it's nowhere near as bad as I was expecting it to be, especially considering Shyamalan's track record. So I'm gonna give it 4 worst Shyamalan films out of 10.
Alright, that sound good?
So, the Lego Movie 2 is a film that exists and that I saw. Not sure there's really much else to it than that. I will completely admit that the original Lego Movie is one of my favourite animated movies of all time. It's incredibly smart, hilarious, full of exciting, amazing set pieces, lovable characters, really great voice acting from some of the best comedic characters around, and some of the most breathtakingly beautiful computer animation ever put to film. And I also did really enjoy the Lego Batman movie, even if it did lack a lot of the wit and charm of the original movie. So I was very excited to see what the Lego Movie 2, the second part, had to offer. And I can't say it was the worst movie I've seen this year. It wasn't even the worst movie I saw that day. But this film does lack a lot of what made the first film so inventive and fun. The basic elements of what made the first film so good do mostly return here. There's still a nice message throughout the film, the animation is just as gorgeous as ever, the acting is very good, and most of the jokes are hilarious. But there's something about the script in this film that I don't think really worked quite as well. One of the best elements of the first movie was how it really played around with its source material and used it all to its advantage. But in this film it feels very much like they found very little left to play around around with. The incorporation of things like the Duplo bricks and the Lego Friends toys were definitely cool, but this film felt way less imaginative than its predecessor. Much of the film just kind of felt like your average sci-fi spoof movie and really lacked a lot of the genius that was present all throughout the first movie. One of the most beautiful moments in the original film is of course that incredible live action sequence, which adds this moral of essentially never letting go of your childlike self and to share things you're passionate about with the people you care about. This obviously is carried over a little bit in this film, with the whole basic premise being that a boy and his sister are fighting and that's why there's a war going on between the Lego bricks and the Duplo bricks. But I found this message was almost beaten to death throughout the film. The live action sequences went from being just a short 2 or 3 minute part of the final act in the film to essentially being an overdrawn recurring segment in the film, something that I felt kind of ruined the power of this scene and the hidden meaning throughout. The humour is luckily not completely ruined throughout the film. Although I felt that the first film was way funnier, there were still a lot of really great moments that made me laugh really hard due to the vibrant animation and voice actors, all of whom do as fantastic of a job as ever. I love these characters and spending time with them made the film a really enjoyable experience. The film is filled with loads of action sequences as well, but there's something about them that made them feel almost tacked on and unnecessary. Not to mention I just didn't think they were quite as exciting or well done as they were in the original. The problem with a sequel in general is you're going to be left constantly comparing it to its predecessor, and although this movie is far from bad, I think everything this film does was done way better in the first movie, to the point where I kind of felt like this film was a little bit pointless. I didn't feel like it added much to the universe, and it was just a constant reminder about how much I loved that original movie. In fact, writing this review has made me want to go back and watch it again, so I very may well do that. The Lego Movie 2 is decent for what it is, but it has a lot of potential that it never quite lives up to and just ended up leaving you wanting a whole lot more. I give it 6 Radiohead albums out of 10.
Alright, that sound good?
I will admit that when I saw Happy Death Day to You, I had never actually seen the first one, so I didn't really know what to expect. I have since watched the first one, which I thought was a pretty enjoyable horror comedy, and I'll probably do a review of it one day. The second movie is a pretty alright movie. After a failed science experiment, Tree from the first movie is sent to a parallel universe where she has to repeat the events of the first movie with slight differences, while also trying to return to her own universe. The film essentially takes the basic formula of the first movie, adds a weird sci-fi twist onto it, and adds a bit more comedy and just kind of goes wild. It's a very silly movie, but it's intentional, so it very rarely becomes an issue. It has fun with itself, and because of that there are very few moments where I found myself getting really angry at how terrible it was or anything. They add a large amount of heart to the movie as well, which does give it a heavy amount of emotion, especially later on in the film, which I thought was genuinely really great. However, the science fiction sides of the film was too stupid that even when you're supposed to take it seriously, you just can't. There's also a montage in the film where Tree keeps killing herself, set to Hard Times by Paramore, which is by far the cringiest, most awkward and unfunny scene in the whole film, in which they basically just remake the montage from Groundhog Day but make it worse. Overall, it's a harmless and somewhat fun movie. Not something that I'd recommend rushing to see, and another film that should probably be designated for a free afternoon while on Netflix, but it's decent for what it is. I give it 6 time machines out of 10. Oh god, why did I think it was a good idea to see this movie? Alita Battle Angel is an adaptation of a manga series under the same name, directed by Robert Rodriguez and written/produced by James Cameron. I will admit that going into this film I was very skeptical. Although I love a good cyberpunk based movie, Robert Rodriguez and James Cameron respectively haven't made a good film in a long time. But the visuals look good and I liked the cast, so I thought maybe I'd leave the film having enjoyed some of it. And although I didn't completely hate it, I can't say I really liked it either. I think the biggest problem I have with this film is how overly crowded it is. It's very obvious they're basing this on a manga series because they cram so much information into the film to the point where the film never really seems to actually move. The pace is awful because every time the film starts moving, they have to introduce some new character trait or integral plot plot point that kind of brings everything to a grinding halt, and man did that get tiring almost instantly. The film felt like a collection of episodes of a TV show that had been edited down to 2 hours. There's so much that's completely lacking that makes the film just a chore to sit through. It's weird that the film feels so crowded because at the same time there are so many moments in it that I felt could have been expanded upon. The characters in the film are actually probably the biggest example of this, and they are so badly underdeveloped that it's actually kind of a joke. You never know how to feel about the characters because they're so one-dimensional and boring to watch. Their motives are all over the place, so it's really hard to really know what's going on at all. It doesn't help that the acting in the film is not really that great. Although Rose Salazar and Ed Skrein do pretty decent jobs, everyone else is obviously phoning it in. But it's time to be fair to the movie and talk about the stuff in it that actually works well. Visually, this film is absolutely stunning. I love the look of the world that they created. It's very obviously inspired by manga and anime, and it has that very gritty future slum Ghost in the Shell look to it, which looks beautiful. And obviously the character models and CGI work all looks incredible. Not to mention the direction of the action sequences is fantastic. It's clear that Rodriguez still knows how to direct a great action scene, but this film is definitely way more style over substance. Although it looks beautiful, it's not a very enjoyable film when you get down to it. Alita Battle Angel is a bloated mess that, although looks great, suffers from trying to cram way too much into its script without being able to justify it or develop the ideas in a fun way to watch. I give it 4 Shark Boys out of 10 Lava Girls. So, people seem to be kind of mixed on Captain Marvel, which I personally find pretty hilarious considering I thought it was more remarkable and memorable than Black Panther, which was nominated for a Best Picture Oscar earlier this year. I thought it was a fun movie with a pretty great lead, an interesting story, and a bunch of really exciting action sequences. Not to mention an incredible soundtrack full of some of the best music that 90s alt-rock had to offer. It doesn't do anything to reinvent the usual Marvel origin movie, but it's entertaining enough not to need to do anything new. The formula may be done to death, but there's something about this film that makes it stand out and makes it a blast to watch. It may just be how charming Brie Larson is, but the script I thought was constantly hilarious and full of some great character development. Many people have complained about how it kind of ruins the continuity of the universe and is too preachy, but I never really thought about any of that because these movies at the end of the day are just popcorn flicks that are just meant to be fun and kind of mindless. It's far from the best Marvel movie or even the best one this year, but for what it is, it's a pretty fun film that does everything that a superhero movie should do and takes you to another world for a couple hours. I give it 7.5 evil cats out of 10. Anyone that saw my review of Get Out will remember that I was a big fan of it, and I've been eagerly awaiting a follow-up. It reminded mainstream audiences of the amazing things that horror movies can do and how deep and theoretical the genre can become when handled by talented directors. And Jordan Peele has once again proved the potential that the horror genre has when someone good takes a stab at it with his new film, Us. Us follows a black American family who become haunted and stalked by a family of murderous doppelgangers. And that's all the plot I'm going to tell because this movie works best when you go in completely blind. Although I'd seen the trailer for the film, I didn't really know much about the film, which made it a more tense and exciting experience to watch. The film, similar to Get Out, uses hidden messages to create a movie that is constantly up to your interpretation, but also never undermines the casual viewer. Because of that, it's a film that is entertaining to watch casually, but also one that you can endlessly break down. Although towards the end of the film, it does start to become a little bit more abstract, which, although it's interesting, I do feel like kind of brings the film down a tiny bit. In fact, my biggest problem with the film is the third act of it, which I think goes on way too long and has way too many possible resolutions before finally coming to an end which barely feels justified. The acting in the film is pretty damn great though, with Lupita Nyong'o giving one of the best performances of the year. The film isn't the best of the year or even Jordan Peele's best ever, but it could potentially be one of the most interesting horror movies to come out this year. Maybe it's one that when I watch it back it'll become better, but as it stands it's a pretty good movie, but nothing incredible. I give it 7.5 rabbits out of 10. I fundamentally disagree with the idea of Disney remaking their classic movies as live-action movies. movies. I think it's a pointless cash grab that basically destroys the timelessness of those movies. Films like the original Dumbo or Beauty and the Beast are classic movies that future generations to come will be able to watch. They stand the test of time and are as fantastic now as when they were released, which I cannot say for the remakes, which are definitely going to age pretty damn quickly. But I was curious how Dumbo would be treated considering Tim Burton was directing it. I went into the movie expecting it to be a complete and utter failure similar to his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory remake. But for what it is, I don't actually think it was all that bad. It's got a good visual style, decent acting and pretty good visual effects. I never hated my time watching it. It was a good little time waster. A mindless film with a little bit of charm, but not quite as magical and heartfelt as the original. I haven't seen the original Dumbo in probably 15 years or so, and I remember more of that film than I do of this film, which I saw less than 2 months ago now. But hey, I can guarantee this film will probably be better than Aladdin, which unless it's completely somehow different than the trailers is going to be an absolute mess. I give Dumbo 5.5 Disney movies that shouldn't but probably will be remade out of 10. Those who saw my review of Infinity War will know that I'm a big fan of the Marvel movies, which you could probably also kind of gather from the fact that I reviewed Captain Marvel earlier in this video. I don't think they're masterpieces, but they're fun popcorn flicks with a rich universe, incredibly well crafted action sequences and great characters. I want to review all the films in the MCU one day, but they just keep adding so many new movies to it that it's kind of hard to keep up. But I've luckily seen them all, which made Infinity War and its follow-up Endgame all the more entertaining. These films are like these big comic book annual events, bringing in all the biggest characters and having them team up against the biggest threats they've ever seen. Endgame follows the events of Infinity War, in which Thanos wiped out half the universe. Basically, the only Avengers left are the ones from the original movie who all team up to reverse the damage that Thanos created in the last movie. Endgame is a 3-hour movie that somehow blasts through and is constantly entertaining and never boring. Even Infinity War had moments for me which I just kind of blanked out of. The Endgame is constantly engaging, exciting and heart-wrenching. The film is essentially 3 completely different movies joined together. You get this post-apocalyptic character study dealing with the effects of losing everyone you love, then there's this time heist which is equal parts hilarious as it is a love letter to the previous movies, and finally you get that huge, big battle. For a film like this to bring to a close a 22 movie story, give it a satisfying ending and also gracefully say goodbye to a few of the series' biggest characters, commendable to say the least. The script is incredibly impressive in how it manages to add some of the best fan service I've ever seen without feeling pandering. People's complaints with The Force Awakens was that it was fan service without any real substance to help it stand alongside the other movies, whereas this film is full of substance and not only stands alongside these other movies, but in my opinion possibly trumps every single one of them. The action sequences are riveting, exciting and leave you constantly on the edge of your seat. The acting, especially from people like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Hemsworth, is just absolutely top notch. The special effects, although being just as excessive as they are in all of these movies, still look pretty damn good. The film's ending is emotionally draining but incredibly poignant. Anyone who's watched these movies since the beginning will be left in tears, not just because of how sad it is, but because of how beautiful it is. It's safe to say that if you don't enjoy superhero movies and you're not a fan of Marvel, then this film will definitely not win you over. But if you like this kind of thing, then you're absolutely gonna love it. By the time this video comes out, it's most likely going to be the highest grossing film of all time, and I'm excited to witness a piece of cinematic history in the making. Endgame is a fun, exciting and emotional rollercoaster that beautifully closes many doors while opening a whole world of possibilities. I give it 9.5 Fortnite memes out of 10. So 2019 has brought us the best video game adaptation to date, which honestly says quite a lot because Detective Pikachu was just average at best. In all fairness, I've never been a Pokemon fan, it just was never really my thing growing up, and now I just think it looks a little bit stupid. I honestly went into the film expecting it to be this massive disaster of a film, but I was somewhat pleasantly surprised. I can't say I was completely bored the whole film, but I also didn't think it was that great. Before talking about all the bad stuff, let's talk about what this film actually does well. The designs of Rhyme City are just beautiful, especially at night. It has a very noir Tokyo sort of look to it due to its dark colours mixed with bright neon lights. It looks pretty damn gorgeous, not just because of the designs, but also the CGI they use. reviews. The creatures look fantastic as well, especially Pikachu, who looks lifelike without ever looking ridiculous. Something I never thought they would be able to pull off. Ryan Reynolds plays the voice of Pikachu, which although at first I thought was pretty ridiculous, it actually does kind of make sense in the context of the film. Ryan Reynolds is a fantastic actor. He knows exactly how to deliver a very charming performance all entirely from vocals, and he honestly is the only real thing that kept the film enjoyable. The script isn't that bad, but it's also far from the best. The narrative twists and plot arcs can be a little bit predictable to say the least, and when they're not predictable, they are just flat out ridiculous. The acting in the film, apart from Reynolds, is pretty horrendous as well. Justice Smith was awful, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise considering his Razzie nomination last year. Catherine Newton is also not the best, although her performance is just pretty forgettable generally. Honestly, if the CGI wasn't so good and Ryan Reynolds wasn't in it, this film could very much be like a Disney Channel original movie. That's the level of acting and writing we have here. Bill Nighy somehow ends up being one of the standout performances as well, for the complete wrong reason. I really like Bill Nighy, but he really phones it in here. He gives one of the most lifeless performances I've seen this year. Overall, if you're a Pokemon fan, I guess see this movie. I don't really know if I recommend it to anyone really, because it's just kind of forgettable and run of the mill. But maybe the fact it's not atrocious will mean video game movies are gonna start getting better now, although probably not. I give it 5 video game movies I didn't know existed before looking on Wikipedia out of 10. Hi guys, thanks for watching this little update film review video thingy. I'm gonna hopefully get on top of doing these reviews, and I'll have some more reviews of newer movies coming out soon, although I don't really think there's much coming out that I really want to see anytime soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.